Everybody, we're back with more best practices from Data Studio, again with Thomas, Alex, and I'm here, Ricardo. Hi, guys.
Hi there. Hello.
So in the last video, we talked a bit about some of the things that we've learned after using Data Studio a lot these last few years. We agree that it's a very powerful tool, but it's always good to know some of the elements that will make it easier to use and to scale when using it for multiple dashboards for companies. No, and now we're going to continue because we didn't have enough time in that video to talk about it.
So last time we talked more about styling your reports, aligning the elements, a report topic for sure, and all of the other stuff. For example, what we can also take into consideration is which chart types we use in Data Studio.
Yes, super important topic. First of all, we have to say there are like how many different chart types do we have and table types? I think it's 15 or more. I don't have the exact same number. And we also need to say, like in general, if you choose one chart and you do some changes, you directly flow into a next chart or next chart type. But I think you have to more see those chart and table types as a starting point to create your visualization. And I think the most important one is tables. Yeah, I mean, we have to like separate tables and charts anyway, but I think it's tables and it's a line chart or bar chart.
So everybody knows tables, so that's the good one. So
you should at least.
And I think already everybody works with tables. And for sure, the big advantage is that you can add a lot of different dimensions and also a lot of different metrics. So that's easy.
Yeah.
So for example, for bar charts, there are differences and so on for that. But tables is maybe not the most attractive one in terms of when you want to see nice looking bars and so on and lines.
Yeah. I mean, let's start with the advantages of the Data Studio tables. First of all, whenever you add a table, it looks nice from the beginning. So you don't need to change so much stuff that it looks nice in a general way. You can, as Alex said, of course, like enter like dimensional values. You can enter like measures or KPIs.
They added now also this horizontal scrolling, what we already talked about. So that's good. So
if you're a Mac user or you have like a mouse with two mouse wheels, and I think that brings us also to the biggest disadvantage of tables. It will always be separated or like distinct between dimensions and measures.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot like have a dimension, then add a measure, and then add another dimension. That's not possible, right? Of course, you can take your measure, like your number, and display it as a text. That would be possible. But then it comes with some like shortage of how to like filter the data, for example, or how to like sort it, like send it or descend it. If you do it as a text, obviously. You always need to be like sure that first of all you have your dimensional values, like your text values. So everything which is a measure is basically attached to the right.
If we want to go more in the directions of the best practices to do maybe with tables, I would say like first of all, I mean I know the horizontal scrolling is possible. Actually, we recommend not using it, because I don't think it's very intuitive for people to expecting, like if you're scrolling through a dashboard vertically, then expecting like this, maybe with the right coaching is okay. I would also say to try to keep everything compact. So take advantage of Data Studio that you can rename field, yes, for all the dashboard, but also specifically in the use that you're having in one table. We like to keep it always in one row. That makes it keep it compact and with a nice look. You can make abbreviations and put it as a footnote what it means, but it really makes it look nicer instead of like having one chunk that is like 3 or 4 lines.
I would also say so. So, I mean, you cannot train your users that there might be additional columns you don't see at the very beginning, or you need to scroll horizontally. Yes, keep it compact. Don't add columns you don't see, because like the price is quite high that some might not realize that. There is another feature we can mention at that point for like Data Studio tables, and it's additional values. So that works quite good, that you basically enter like your dimensions, your metrics, and then you say, okay, some of them are not active at the beginning. So you can basically add them also with kind of small like function on the top right of your table. But also there you have exactly this, maybe not the same problem, but an additional problem. You need to train your viewers. If they don't know that there is this like small function that you can add or remove like different measurements, need to be very aware of like training in that particular option.
So the right term is optional values, as far as I know.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think an additional element of how to structure tables, I would go to keep everything consistent. Like, for example, when we have monetary values, we don't go that much for compact metrics. I think in tables, we show the full value with 2 decimal points, while when it's a scorecard, we do show the compact. So Data Studio allows you to put instead of 2,000 to K, 2 million to M, to keep it consistent that way. So everything is exact in this way of describing. Also, if it's monetary values, you can select in Data Studio to say that, yes, this is euro. So it shows next to each sign the euro symbol on it. And these are small details that really, when I see a table that someone just dropped the data there compared to someone who knows how to use Data Studio, it really takes a couple of minutes. It's not just about looking nice. Now you can also tell when something is wrong. Like if I have it perfectly ordered, I can quickly see like, okay, this number doesn't look right. Like the whole QA process is way smoother.
I think based on our experience, that really depends on how you basically structure your table. So first of all, Ricardo, you're completely right. If you show the original number, it's always the best because you see super easily how big the number is. That gives you an intuitive way of understanding basically the relationship between different measurements. Of course, sometimes if you work with customers who are more like in any numbers which are more than maybe 1 million, doesn't matter if it's like revenue or if it's page views, but then you need to understand that depends on your table. If your table is quite packed, then of course sometimes you need to use those compact numbers, which you can basically set up in the style part of your table, and then those compact numbers make sense. What really like annoys me with that function is that I cannot say how they cut the compact value. So you cannot say, for example, I would like to have everything in millions. That's not possible.
But you can compact the behind the comma. You can compact the values.
This you can do, But basically, Data Studio is deciding for you whether it's millions, billions, a K, or whatever. And this is then the issue you said, Ricardo, that visually you start from the left and you say 100, 100, 100, but one is maybe million, one is K, and one has no basically additional sign. So, and then intuitively you realize wrong values, and that's exactly the reason why you normally should not do it. But if you have not enough space left and you have a lot of values inside, then it makes sense. Or if the values are too big.
Yeah, I'm just taking notes now because I didn't realize I had so many opinions about tables. Should I continue?
That's why we do it. So nothing is scripted here, by the way.
This is my small notebook. It's all about tables. I would go like for best practices. I also go like for us, what we like to do is always aligning dimensions to the left, metrics to the right. Data Studio allows you to put them centered or justified in any direction. Out of things looking smoothly, always metrics aligned to the right, always dimensions aligned to the left. That's like an absolute go.
Sometimes, sometimes, I also center them. It's another like disadvantage I see in tables, that you cannot isolate the header from the values. So if you say it's right aligned, then your header is also right aligned. And this is sometimes, it doesn't look quite nice if you basically put them together, because if you have a very long like KPI name, like a header name, and you have a very short number, like a potential value, then it looks not that good if you say, okay, you have here your revenue, and right next to your revenue, you would like to say, okay, how much in percent is that overall? And then you have your revenue right aligned, and then there's a big gap till this potential number comes, because your KPI name is quite long. And then sometimes I do it centered.
What I also sometimes recognize is, or one problem is when your last metric, so on the right position, and you put it also right aligned, and then you want to scroll, you don't see the numbers anymore because the scroll bar is at top of the numbers on the right.
That would also be a reason to maybe center it.
Yeah,
Then.
exactly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So because of that, I mostly centralize my tables. And what I quickly wanted to say in terms of dimension on the left and metrics on the right, just as a quick outstanding topic, we also create our BigQuery tables like that. So we always say the first 1, 2, 3, whatever columns in the table are always the dimensions. And also we tried already in the ETLs that at first always comes the dimensions and then the metrics, so that we always have a clear structure first time, or on the left, the dimensions and then all of the metrics.
That makes then really a table structure also in BigQuery easier, except of you have nested basically fields inside. Then we usually say, okay, we make everything which is not nested at the beginning, and then the nested columns will come. Yeah. What else about tables?
I have way more. Should I continue, or do you have another one?
Continue, Ricardo.
Then another
lead
one.
Lead the conversation. Like that.
I think one point here that is important to take into consideration is like how data savvy the people who are using the dashboard then are going to be. I think a lot of moments of the dashboard sometimes get a lot of bad reputation because it's just like, they just charts. But like usually people are used to managing data on a spreadsheet, on a table. And if you give them like a super powered table, it's nice. But sometimes they still feel like they want to go back to Excel or go back to spreadsheets and do that. Best practice that I would recommend is like always, like you can select at a table or any type of chart to download it as a CSV. You can put it it's a checkbox that you can tick, and we put it fixed, so it's always there. It's as part of the header, so you see the 3 dots, not floating apart, so it's always obviously there. And actually for KPI boxes, we remove that because it's just distracting. Like, why would you download a CSV that is just like a number? That gives a sense of security and gives people the confidence to be using the dashboard that are used to working only on Excel files.
What we sometimes recognize when we are talking with customers is we creating a table or something in Data Studio, and then they say, I'm not important what you're showing because I already imported to CSV file and then work with it.
Yeah.
So sometimes say already, should we then not maybe updating the Data Studio table in the way you want to analyze the data?
So the first sentence we say usually is don't do it. And then in the second sentence we try to explain. One of our first principles that we say, let's create a dashboard which you can use on your daily basis without exporting everything and then grouping it together again, because then you obviously don't need a dashboard. I can send you also the numbers directly from the database. So that's just then a layer of complexity which is not needed. So what we create should be the one which helps you in your daily usage without exporting something. Because the moment you export stuff, the one who created the dashboard did his job not the right way. So, because obviously something is missing, because otherwise you have no reason to export.
Yeah.
What you said, Ricardo, is the second thing which is like really important before you start doing anything. Understand your audience. I think in everything you do, not only in data business, you need to understand your audience. If you build a website, you need to understand your audience. Let me give you an example. So when we work with like young startups, right, where we know, okay, everyone in this company is like data driven and analysts because they search for those people, they hire those people, and they would like to work in an agile way. Then we can like build super complex interactive dashboards because they will grasp it super quick and they will understand how to use them, and they get basically the benefits out of that. If you work with people who are not that data driven already and who need to learn it, at the beginning it makes sense to give them a little bit less functionality, or less complexity. Let's talk about complexity here. So same information, same data, but not that built in a complex way and interactive way, because sometimes it's way too much in terms of how to handle and to control the dashboards. So build it in an easier way. Give them like KPIs, give them charts that they can easily read the insights of the data and understand what's behind that.
One last point on the basic best practices from table, and then we can go like into best practices advanced. I would say we often add, instead of using the background of the table as the element, we put a figure kind that allows us to have the exact margin that we want, no? Because of how the padding, like I think Alex, you were mentioning how it functions, it's sometimes weird that the numbers are exactly right at the edge, not just with the scrolling, but also on the edge of your table, and it looks weird. So we always, by default, not just with tables, with any type of element that is there, we first do like a mock-up, just white boxes or the color that we're having them, and then on top of this we put the elements.
So we always put a shape behind it. We also put them to also
like a white rectangle at the end.
To also then put the table title at the top and so on, and that we don't have this small margin at the.
And you were right. This is exactly the reason that padding in a table is not an option, right? This is exactly why we do it. That doesn't solve the problem with the scrolling, right? Because it's still inside the same basically element. Another thing I would want to say is, if you create tables which have more data, think about, is it better to make a pagination or is it better to scroll? What happens if you have a white element which is going over the whole screen and you have multiple elements below that, and you need to scroll your report and you're with the mouse inside your table, then you scroll the table but not the report. So if you would like to scroll the report, you need to be outside of that table element. But if the table is quite wide and quite big already, which is maybe then in terms of design already a wrong approach, then don't let the table be like a scrolling table, because then use pagination. Because if you're on top with your mouse on that table and you scroll, the report will get scrolled. If the table is scrollable, only the table will scroll. You need to scroll till the very end if you're on that element, till the report continues to scroll, which in terms of user interaction and the user experience, not really good.
Or you have then the report just fits in the whole monitor. So then you cannot scroll in the report because everything fits, and then you can also scroll.
Exactly. Then you have a non-scrollable report, and then it makes sense to also scroll the table. Also there, I mean, Data Studio, I think, is handling in a very good way. At least I didn't experience something bad there, but everything which is like scrollable is also getting loaded into the browser. I think like how Data Studio is loading the data is already quite advanced, but you need to, of course, get the data first, and with pagination, it's handled a little bit different.
We try to minimize the number of directions that you can move the report to. No, like if you have a long report, don't put there also scrolling tables, put the whole table there. Try to not make the user need to be moving their screen all the ways. No, if you have a long table, then put long tables, and that's it. If you have it fit to width.
One more thing, what I memorized is that we don't use often these bars or heat maps inside the table, as far as I know. But for example, what you mentioned with these compact numbers, there it would make maybe sense to put these lines, because, for example, if you have revenue in Germany with 1 million and in Switzerland with some K, you see it then quickly in the length of the bars.
In exact those things, I sometimes do it. Yeah. If we, for example, talk about product revenues, for product revenues, you always have, if you see like 20 to 30 products and you start with product number 1, you always have this huge descending of like revenue, right? They are not quite even like distributed over like 30 products. Because you have your top seller and maybe number 2, 3, 4, 5. So, and then it sometimes makes sense to have that number, because let's be honest, you're not interested in this exact sales number normally, at least not if you look in the dashboard and you just want to get a quick overview, but you would like to see, okay, how are my products working compared to each other? And then those charts are interesting, like those bar charts inside the column. And I add basically then also the value.
I think I would go more in the direction of Thomas and this one. I think we do use these bars and heat maps. I think for pivot tables in particular, we use heat maps a lot, almost to every pivot table that we put. For me, it would be hard to say like a best practice recommendation on adding bar charts or heat maps into tables. The only thing I would say is like, don't go crazy with it. It's like, not every metric needs to be it gets then a bit distracting if you have like 6 columns with numbers and then each of those is a bar. It just tells you nothing. It's almost all the bars are the same size. Like try to find the main metric that you're focusing on, or maybe 2. And then with this, the bar charts that help you guide where you're going.
When we talk about tables, let's talk about the headers. And especially if we have pivot tables, let's talk about the headers in the pivot table, because there's something what we do as a small track. You know what I mean?
No.
So you have those 2 header layers, I would say. Yeah, you have the basically header of the columns, and you have an additional header which tells you what kind of x-axis and y-axis you're using. And I'm normally not interested in those because they are normally part of my report name, and they also on the top right of the table as far as I know, and I don't want to display them. And that's why we simply show them in a white font color, that we don't see them. So that's really a small trick to get rid of them, because you cannot say crop them or exclude them or not show them, but you can make them in the same color as your background. Sometimes it's a problem because we use those boxes behind, and you don't want to have this huge white space. So you try to position the pivot table as high as possible to lose not so much space. And then this small text is directly where the breaking point between the white and the gray background is. So then you need another a gray box which you put on top of that. So that is a little bit weird, but at the end you will not see it when you use the report.
Yeah, so when we're using pivot tables, sometimes you need them. So pivot tables you use when you also need dimensions in rows and in columns. Yeah, so cohorts table is, I think, one of the biggest examples.
In e-commerce, cohort. What makes sense when it comes to pivot tables, especially with cohorts, is that you use the conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is not that easy to set up. It doesn't make sense to make this big red or green conditional formatting inside, because it completely breaks your visualization of everything. What you should do is take the lightest color you can find in terms of red or green, and this is then your 100%. The key here is to set this 100% in a very smart way, that you basically realize, okay, where do you basically have a number you would like to highlight and where you have numbers you don't want to highlight, because that makes a big difference for the viewer to grasp as quick as possible the relevant data out of basically the pivot table.
Maybe some extra last suggestions about tables as a frame of mind to keep into consideration that a table in Data Studio has a lot of flexibility because of all the calculated metrics that you can put. I think we've taken advantage of that a lot. Include links within the table, not just links to outside, but also links to other parts of our dashboard as elements in the table itself, and also adding either images stored in a cloud folder. We can then talk about adding other elements that just make the dashboard look more fresh. I'm all into making information density as a priority, but then you also need to take into consideration who is then using this dashboard and put them, even if a map is not that important, you can put a map so that people find that the dashboard is very good looking. And for the tables, maybe an emoji doesn't help that much, but if it helps people to feel like the dashboard is nice, you can put the name of the country and right next to it a flag, and people like it. And it takes a few seconds to set up.
I think that's really worth an extra video about making the reports more, bringing more interaction inside. What you also mentioned with the smileys or the emojis, imagine you would like to show, is this product inside your product database? Did you add a description or not? Of course, you can show yes or no, or you could show a 0 and a 1. But how about you put a check mark or a red cross? Immediately, based on the color alone, from the green check mark to the red cross, immediately see, okay, done, not done. And this is how you can use emojis inside the tables in a very smart way. Maybe one last thing about the numbers you can basically create. When you use pivot tables, you need to understand how your x-axis is working, or how is it sorting. And therefore, you need to make sure that you first of all have the values, because those are the names you would like to show, but you need another dimension for the sorting. And this one, when you create your numbers inside BigQuery, you should think about that particular one immediately. So let's say you make cohorts and you would like to say, okay, basically first order, 0 to 30 days, 60 to 90, and so on. That's a text because you have a minus inside. So you cannot sort based on that value, obviously, right? It will give you a wrong sorting. So you need to have an additional column for saying when it's 0 to 30, it's a 1. And if it's 30 to 60, it's number 2. And there it goes. And if it's basically the first order or the initial sale or whatever, then it's a 0 that you can basically sort based on that number. And as a second dimension inside your pivot table on the x-axis, you have this value, which is giving you the text. And now it's coming the small trick again. You just take your small, how did we call it, rectangle shade, and put it with the same color as your background, like white in that case, below your ID. You will not see the ID anymore.
Same problem and also same workaround is, for example, when you want to show data for the weekdays, so for Monday, Tuesday, and so on. Because then you can also not for sure sorting by the name of the weekday. So then you also have to say, okay, Monday is a 1, when Tuesday is 2, and so on. And then you can also sort by that.
Exactly. And BigQuery has a built-in function for that. I think even Data Studio can display it.
They added now some months ago some date functions.
It's a full table masterclass. One last tip, I would say, using tables and every type of chart as filters. You can just select that option in the style section, and that allows you, if you have multiple tables, you click on an element of the table and it's going to filter all those charts. You need to onboard the users to learn that they can click on the tables and do it. But that's a cool way to then play around with the data that you're showing.
Yeah, in the next episode, I think, Ricardo, we go then more into the charts.
I think we can have another table episode just about tables.
Let's maybe start with the basics for the charts, and then let's go for the advanced table version.
Thanks everybody for watching, and subscribe to the channel to check out more best practices and tips about Data Studio and BigQuery.
And also check the Medium blog post and check out LinkedIn, where we post some important stuff for our company, and also the YouTube videos and the Medium blog post.
So stay tuned and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.